there was concern that diplomatic relations would be broken off altogether. And in that case, only us illegals would be back. And that was never shared with me. And there were no instructions given in case, but I guarantee you we would have gotten instructions. And I don't know, I don't have a good guess, but that those instructions could have also meant to be involved in dangerous operations like sabotage and so forth. So, but I was also sent with more of a generic idea, just to sort of build it and they will come. Let's hope you can do something there. Get to know important people, particularly people who are decision makers in foreign policy or influencing foreign policy. And then otherwise, get to know as many people that you can. I mean, the mantra was always contacts, because and then check them out and see if they are positioned or might be positioned in the future to work with secrets, and if they are recruitable. And then I had a couple of special assignments that required mobility in the United States that the diplomats didn't have. And lastly, periodically, I was tasked to write reports that goes with the analysis that I told you about, the analytic training I had. Reports about how the American people reacted to certain events in the world, important events. And I thought it wasn't very valuable, but when I compare the value that the other sources provided, these were the diplomats. They had interaction with Americans, but they didn't live amongst Americans, so they didn't really. What they did, I guarantee you, they read the New York Times, the Washington Post, and extracted some information from there. I actually had some good idea how, and also what Americans think about the next presidential election and so forth. This was wishful thinking. They just mentioned Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the national security advisor to Carter, and he also led the foreign policy department. I forgot what it's called at Columbia University. That was like daydreaming. And then they mentioned like the Hudson Institute, which was a conservative think tank, and the Trilateral Commission. They thought the Trilateral Commission was Rockefeller led by the Rockefeller family, prepared for a takeover of the first of all the third world countries and then the communist countries. That was, I mentioned Brzezinski just as an example. There was no way that I was in a position in American society to befriend people at that higher level. My first job was bike messenger. All right, and then I became a student, and then I became a programmer. None of these activities would have made it make it very natural to get close to somebody and befriend them. And when I was, the one job that I had before I resigned, it was the programmer job, that had some chances, but in those days, and this may in some companies be the same nowadays, we were on the job pretty much 24 hours a day. So we worked in the office, and then there was a lot of processing at night, and we were on call. When something failed, the operational folks, they would call us and then ask what they can do, and sometimes we had to go into the office. So I was never really in a position to make those types of contracts that were of interest, with one exception. I profiled quite a few fellow students, because, and I picked those that might wind up working in government based on what their major, and those that had strong political opinions, left, right, or whatever. I don't when we would have easily recruited a right winger on the false flag. You know, you come in and you're a Soviet agent and you introduce yourself. You're from Israel. Hey, can you help us out? So that was pretty much it. And you know, and the fact that I never acquired a state secret made me think I was a failure, but I was not. They decorated me with the second highest decoration of the Soviet Union just a year before I quit. One other thing that might be of interest, while I was a programmer at an insurance company, it was medical insurance, group medical, and we insured every employee of some major weapons manufacturers, such as Honeywell. And I had access to those records. They were not protected. And, you know, they would be so good information if, you know, there could be some, you know, some high level person or even somebody who was known to work in the sensitive nuclear arena. And that person was known to have a certain health problem, or family members have a health problem where the coverage is not good enough. I mean, this is how you recruit people. And I told the KGB what I had access to, and they didn't blink. They had no idea of the value of information. The Russians now do, okay? But this was so bizarre, and you know, I didn't start arguing with them because if they had said, you know, okay, collect, I would have had to write some programs to sort through the files, because you can't print this out and read it all. There were thousands, but I probably would have been able to come up with this. I knew the record layouts in a couple of special assignments I had that where I had to locate people that were outside of the Washington, D.C. area where the diplomats couldn't travel, and I could. And lastly, there was a special assignment that I forgot to mention, but it yielded nothing. There was an operation that I didn't know it had a name. I didn't know what it was, but everybody in the KGB who was an agent in a foreign country was assigned a U.S. military object for periodic observation to figure out whether there are signs of preparation for war. And so I had the assignment to do that for the naval weapons station that still exists today on the Jersey shore, called Earl. And this was called Operation Ryan, and it was very important to the head of the KGB. I was trained to recognize what kind of a ship it is from the silhouette, from a distance. But you know, every time I showed up there was nothing out of the ordinary, and there were no preparations for war. There were preparation to defend in case of a war, but America was not going to be an aggressor in that conflict. No way. We had between the KGB and me, we had a set of signals in 2 signal spots where the signals could be placed. Very short, like 1 word or 2 words pieces of information, and they were graphic signals, you know, chalk mark or a dot, a colored dot or something like that. And so the signals could mean arrived in the country, received your recent radiogram, ready to come back to Moscow for this every other year travel, that kind of stuff. Very brief information. And one signal that was for me, and the signals were set where the diplomat would pass by on his way to work, so he didn't have to, you know, do weird things. You know, it's very normal and they knew the way I went to work. So every day when I went to the subway, I was looking at the spot at one of those support beams that was the elevated train, A train that ran above ground. And there was never a signal. I didn't expect one. And one day I was surprised. It was a huge surprise. It was like, oh my God, a red dot. That meant the translation was extreme danger, leave the country as soon as you can. Neither the FBI nor I can guess what made them think that I was in danger. And I wasn't ready to leave this girl. It's it it was a tough decision to make, and I doubted that they were right. But you know, this was the mighty KGB. If they were right, I go to jail, and I'm not any use for that little kid. Because I knew that if I leave her, she would grow up dirt poor because of her mother's inability to make enough money to support them well. And so, and then I had to come up with an idea to tell the KGB that, you know, I'm not coming, because eventually what they did, and they broke this one time, they broke the rule that another agent shouldn't meet an illegal, because I was stalling for a while because it was possible. You know, I could have, the radio reception was bad. I didn't get the radiogram, or the radio was broken, or I was in a hospital. So they were trying to figure out what's wrong, what's with this guy. They weren't at that point weren't thinking that I was going to resist that command. So they sent one of the agents, and while I was waiting it was dark outside, in early December. It was dark and pretty chilly. And a stranger came up to me. There weren't too many people on that platform yet. And he whispered into my ears, "You got to come home or else you're dead." Now, I didn't think it was a threat, but because he spoke very bad English. And, you know, what he probably meant to say, "or else you're busted," or something like that. Dead is a bad word to use. And so, but there was a chance it was a threat. So I had to take it seriously. And for me, the lure to go back was huge. I had a lot of dollars saved up over there. That was a fortune on the other side of the Iron Curtain. The Soviets promised me a house. It was very rare that, you know, private citizens that weren't like high up in the government had lived in houses. And I would have lived a good life. They would have still used me for trips into the West as a courier, or maybe for a little while as a handler, not as an illegal for a long period of time, maybe with the forged documents, whatever. It would have had very interesting and rich life, highly regarded, and 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 would still have the adventure that I always like to have. So everything that was good for me was over there, going back into the GDR, and the Soviet Union. And there was the threats that were here associated with staying, and that equation should have gone, okay, I'm leaving. But that little girl won, not by much, but she won. So I'm going to anticipate the question. So people always ask me, so how did you manage to resign from the KGB? Was that possible? No, not really. But I came up with a lie that they bought, and somebody asked me the other day if at that time HIV/AIDS did not exist or was curable, what would you have said then? And I said, I have no idea. There was the only convincing lie was that, I'm sorry, I can't come back. I have HIV/AIDS, and I also made it credible. In the letter, I indicated who gave it to me, and that was a female who had who I had a sexual intercourse with, her previous boyfriend was a drug addict. So they really believed this. One of my talents is to be very, I'm very creative with words, with stories, and so forth. And so this one worked really well. They actually went to my German family and told them that I died. Okay, so I found this out many years later. After about 3 months of like doing more surveillance detection, I felt nothing was going on, and so I went to Shauna's mother, and I said to her, "All right, let's save up some money, and in a year we're buying a house." 1 year after I resigned from the KGB, I forgot that, and that was critical. The Berlin Wall came down, and I was so surprised. So was everybody else. And so now I was curious, how did that happen? Because I knew all I knew, in quotation marks, was this was a stable government, and we were doing very well economically. They lied to their own people, and some of them didn't know how bad a shape their economy was in, and on and on. So, but they did have very good athletes. And there was one Summer Olympics when the East Germans had more medals than the Americans. That small country with 17 million people, as opposed to 150 million that were Americans. So now I had to find out what happened, and this was 1989, and so you could already do searches on the internet. You didn't have to go to the library. And oh boy, I found out the truth. I found out how many people got killed when they tried to flee the East and go to the West. I was able to read some unredacted works of my revolutionary hero, Vladimir Lenin, who was the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution that eventually wound up in the foundation of the Soviet Union. And I found out that he was not a hero. He was a crook, a very smart crook, a criminal, and he had people murdered. Well, okay, when the FBI when they heard about my existence, they knew that I was an undercover guy who had not been caught for 19 years. No, 19 years because 10 years I was active, and then 9 years until they actually said hello. When they got the information, it was 17 years, but they knew that I was really well trained, so they was very cautious. They didn't know whether I was still active or not. I could have been active. Who knows? Because they didn't even know that I was a German, and if they may have thought I'm a Russian, and as a Russian, there was more of a chance that I'm still active. Working for Mother Russia. So they were very careful. Lots of observing from a distance, just checking patterns, and they went through my garbage when they could, and they put a listening device in my kitchen. That was towards the end of the investigation, and I had an argument with the mother of Chelsea, my daughter, and that argument got really heated, and it was totally silly on her part. She was very suspicious of me. She always thought I had affairs with other women, and I did not. So, and I figured, let me convince her that I'm really on her side. And I shared to her my past, and I said, you see, I sacrificed practically everything for me personally to be with you and Chelsea. Doesn't that mean something to you? Well, it meant something to the FBI, because when I was saying that, that somebody listened in, and I had my confession. They had my confession on tape, and so a few weeks afterwards, they introduced themselves. There was a fake traffic stop, and they asked me to step out of the vehicle, And then some fellow came. That was a fake uh, state police, state trooper. And he told me step out of the car, and then another person in civilian clothes came by, and he flipped open something that looked like an ID, and immediately I knew that was law enforcement. And he said, FBI, we would like to have a talk with you. So this is how it went. They put me in a vehicle, and there was a partner there sitting next to me. He had a gun strapped to his right ankle. So I thought it was pretty serious. But I had the courage after about 5 minutes to ask them, am I under arrest? And the answer was just a plain old no. Okay, that raised some hopes. And at that point, I I got a little bolder because instinctively, and that wasn't really logically thought out, instinctively, I knew that if I could make them like me a little bit, I would get better treatment. So I asked them, so what took you so long? And that smile that one of the guys could not suppress told me I managed. And so they took me to a motel and put me in a room. They had rented an entire wing of that hotel. All the other rooms were empty. And the end of the hallway, there would at each end there was somebody in uniform with a weapon. And so we sat down in a room, and I opened up the conversation, and I said, "Gentlemen, I know that the only chance I have for this situation to do the least amount of damage to myself and my family is to cooperate fully. And I will do so, and I have no reason to not cooperate. I love my family, and I love the life that I have now." So then we had 2 hours worth of them asking me questions, and then they let me go home. It was a warning by one of the guy who led a rather sizable surveillance team. He said, if you think of running, we have every intersection covered. So, and that was unnecessary. The thought of running never crossed my mind. So, and I cooperated. We had, like, me and the lead agent, we met twice a week for a couple of hours, and he asked me about every single detail I could remember about my life, and how the KGB operated. I could my very being was of interest to them. I also at one point had a psychologist, an FBI psychologist, give me a whole bunch of tests. They wanted to know what makes somebody like me successful, and how the Russians might be still looking for people that are similar to me. And after about 6 weeks, I had to pass a lie detector test. And when I passed that, uh, my 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 friend, my now friend from the FBI said, "Okay, Jack, if you want to, we will get you a green card, but you could also eventually become a citizen." Bingo! I was home free, but it was still illegal. I still didn't have the green card, and that took the bureaucrats in the FBI a long time. I don't know how much. I have it written down someplace, but it was probably 6, 7 years until I could breathe freely. When I applied for another job, I didn't have to lie that I was Jack Barsky and born in 1944, which made me older than I am. I was born in 49. So it was a gradual process, but now I'm free, and I love it in Texas. I love the people here, and I love this country, and I don't want to live anyplace else.